Patrick, you are live.
All right, thank you very much, Kayla, acting as our clerk tonight. I appreciate it. Nice to see you. Welcome, everybody, to our council meeting here on the 13th of July. And we are all here with the exception of Councillor Leishman, who advised me earlier today that she's just not feeling very well. So she has asked to be away tonight. So I'm sure we will get by without her, and wish her all the best and hope that she feels better soon, as we all want her back, don't we? So there you go. Council, we have a full agenda, so how about we get right to it on this beautiful day. The temperature's a little bit better, but maybe we can get this meeting wrapped up and still be able to enjoy some of the day. Item number 1 is our closed session. There were no closed sessions tonight. So item number 2 is an approval of the agenda. I'll look for a mover and seconder, please, for the approval of this agenda. Broderick and Deneen. And just for advisement, our agenda did have a small added items at noon today. We have an additional public participation item, which is item 4.3. And we also have a bylaw 20-51 regarding electronic meeting participation that's been added if anybody is looking to see what's all on the agenda tonight. All right, anything further? Very good. I've got a mover and seconder. I'll call the motion. All those in favor? And that motion carries. Thank you very much. Item 3, disclosure of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof. If any member has a disclosure of pecuniary interest, they would let us know at this time, or if it comes up during the meeting, please bring it forward and we'll deal with it appropriately. Thank you. Item number 4 is our public participation period. Written comments are received, of course, by noon on the day of the council meeting. And during this time of meeting in electronic Zoom format like this, we ask people to send them in writing. So I have 3 items. As I mentioned earlier, we have an additional one, 4.3. So let me speak on item number 4.2 and 4.3. These are both items from Karen and another person. I just missed his name here. It's not written down. Anyway, we have 2 items in regards to speeding on concession 6. We certainly have received those messages from you. Council is aware of it. Council is also, of course, dealing with speeding concerns or hearing about speeding concerns across our entire township. This is unfortunately not new to us. We have certainly heard about speeding. The municipality, of course, is working with the Ontario Provincial Police Huronia West Detachment to try to mitigate any speeding. And speeding enforcement is completely in the hands of the OPP in our community. And so we are, working with them as partners to try to make sure that we have proper enforcement. One of the issues that's come up of recent, I don't know if members of council have seen it. There's a little bit of social media work that went on with the Huronia West Detachment Inspector, Mr. Phil Brown, as well as the Ontario Provincial Police Highway Safety Division Sergeant Carrie Schmidt. Those 2 gentlemen joined me in Dunedin recently, where we did a little video, and I showed the 2 gentlemen the scene of that horrific accident that took the life of a young man from our community, and I expressed to them with no uncertain terms that speeding must stop in our township. And so Mr. Brown made a very good statement on camera that you can go back and look at. He said that he will be initiating a directed patrols called Strict is Fair. Strict is Fair is actually over 20 years old as a program of the OPP where they launch an initiative for traffic enforcement. And basically if they don't have any leniency, they just, if they have a speeding concern, they pull you over, you're going to get a speeding ticket. So Strict is Fair is going to be coming to our community. So that's something that we should all be aware of. Certainly later on in our agenda, you'll see the notices of motion regarding some speed reduction possibilities in our township. We will be speaking about those on the 27th of July, which is our next full council meeting. As is our procedure, we put notices on the agenda so the public have an opportunity to comment on them. And then we talk about them and debate them at the next council meeting. So that is where that will be dealt with. So I want to thank those 2 members who sent in their letters, and I appreciate hearing from them. Item number 4.1 is an item in regards to ATVs on Clearview roads. Also very timely, considering that later on in our agenda, you'll see a motion from Councillor Broderick in regards to ATVs on our roads. Mr. Bickle's comments are very well heard. We've certainly heard it from a lot of people in our community. So this council will have an opportunity to debate those very merits at our next council meeting on the 27th. So again, in a public process, we've put the information out there by having our councillors put their motions on the floor for council to consider, as well as for the public to make comment on. So that's our public participation tonight. So I want to thank members who sent them in. Again, I mentioned this at our last council meeting. Council, I do not feel this is a really good way to do public participation, but it's the best we can do right now during this COVID situation. So I do appreciate hearing from members of the public. I, like you, would also like to get together and meet in an actual chamber where we can sit with each other and communicate as people. And I think that would be a much better way to deliver governance in our community. And so I'm very hopeful that we will be looking at our chambers once again, council. We can invite the public to join us there too. Okay, we're gonna move on. Item 5 is the deputations presentation. There are none. Item 6 is our public meeting, which is scheduled for 6:30 p.m. And so we will move on with our agenda and move right to item number 7 is the approval of the minutes of the council meeting. We have 2 minutes to approve for both June 22nd and June 24th. So I'll read the motion. Recommendation, be it resolved that Council of the Township of Clearview hereby approve the minutes of the June 22nd and June 24th 2020 council meetings as presented. Can I have a mover and seconder on the motion, please? Deputy Mayor and Councillor Walker, thank you very much. Any questions? All right, seeing none, I'll call the motion. All those in favor? And motion carries. Thank you very much. Item number 8 is our business, any business arising from the minutes. I'll look to members of the council if there's anything that comes up. All right, seeing none. And item 9, we'll move right to communications from the mayor. There's quite a few items on here, actually 7 different items. We'll go through them quickly. Item 1, there is no closed session report. Item 2, MTO, funding to municipalities to support to enhance cleaning of our public transit vehicles. So that's a great announcement. Perhaps Mr. Sage or if Mr. Perot are here. Is Mr. Perot here? Steve, how are you? Do you want to comment on how this is going to be very positive for our community, Steve?
It absolutely is, Your Worship. Some of the protocols that have changed have added costs to running the transit system. As council may be aware, we've changed, or we've referred back to our normal schedule most recently. So this funding will help with the protocols. Not a huge issue for Clearview. Obviously, those municipalities with a bigger transit system, it'll have more effect, but it will help in covering some of the cost of the enhanced cleaning that we have to do on the buses.
For sure. And our bus is a small bus, so it's a little smaller space to have to actually clean. So I appreciate that. So anyway, it'll be great for our patrons who use the bus service that they know that the enhanced cleaning is happening. Thank you, Mr. Sage. NVCA board highlights. The report is here. Is there any questions about that? Mr. Patterson, would you like to speak? Go ahead. Mr. Patterson is our representative on the NVCA.
Yeah, thanks. Just draw council's attention to the item that's relates to the NVCA planning and regulations database. It's an in-house database. I'm not sure if our staff is even that familiar with it. We had a presentation at the last meeting. This is an attempt by the NVCA to improve the overall permitting and communications correspondence with regard to planning permits. And while it was intended, and it still is intended for in-house use, had a brief discussion, and I thought that it might be worth a look on the part of Clearview, perhaps maybe a presentation from NVCA or maybe a phone call from staff, CAO, Sage. I don't know if you're aware of it, but it has potential of keeping track of the progress through the permitting process. They didn't intend to make it part of an interface with their co-partners, their other agencies and municipalities, but in a brief discussion, they're open to some discussion on that. So maybe it's something that I'll talk to the CAO about and see if you want to meet. It kind of goes in with what we did several months ago when we met with the staff and tried to find ways through the path. This doesn't affect the mandate. You know, there's still the province work ahead of us in terms of their mandate, but just in terms of the current process, it may have some potential to improve our communications.
All right, if I may, Councillor Patterson, just a question to you. Is this something that they're doing that's rather similar to what I recognize, Deputy Mayor, what we're doing on our website, like our Clearview.planning website has, it follows the progress of each project and updates it. Is that something that the NVCA are going to be, is that what you're talking about?
It's similar in that it is tracking the various items by technical group. The technicians use it, and the planning departments use it to make sure that they're optimizing the process. That is the point that I'm making. There might be an opportunity to have a public window. Not sure that the MVCA can even afford the expense to do that and simply getting the expertise, but I thought we'd open up the discussion anyways and see where it could go. And since we were one of the few municipalities that actually took a proactive stance a few months ago and saying, look, we've got to improve permitting and the way the process is working. Maybe this is a way of doing that as well. So,
Mr. Sage, do you have any comment on that process that the NVCA are working?
To Councillor Patterson's point, through you, to your worship, I was unaware that they were implementing a similar system. It is similar to ours. It has some of the attributes. Sounds like it has some of the attributes that our system has. So yeah, if you were to reach out, something we'd be interested in. If I was the MVCA, it would be very difficult to be able to share that with everyone, but I guess we'll see what they have to say.
All right, thank you.
And that exactly is the concern that they have. But given the situation we're in, the times we're in, I think we shouldn't ignore the opportunity of possibly linking together. So that's the only reason I bring it together.
Yeah, if I could add, your worship,
Sure.
like some of those applications are confidential, so controlling the access is fairly costly. So thanks.
Fair enough. Anything the IT people can work out, that's good with us. Thank you very much. Anybody else have any questions on that? All right, I'm going through each item because we do have things to talk about in each item. Yes, Deputy Mayor, I did see you. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. So I'm sorry that I've started bringing this up and I meant to mention it to you earlier, but I've had several phone calls, complaints from the Dewitt's application and the Gordon's application, where the NVCA has taken extremely long period of time to respond. They have hired their own engineers, had professional engineers give solutions for what the NVCA concerns were, but they always want more. And every time you go back, they want more. And the fact that they have hired these professional engineers to come up with these solutions, I would like to put forth a motion that we instruct the building department to issue building permits for the Dewitt's application, the Gordon's application, and bypass the MVCA because they're just stalling and delaying, and unreasonable delays, unreasonable requests for what they want done. And staff, particularly the Gordon's application, staff were there. I was there on site, and they're taking 2 old buildings, shrinking them down to 1 building, and they were already existing. And but that wasn't a good enough solution, and it just goes on and on and on. And I think it's time for us to get a message across the NVCA. And I'm putting forth the motion, I'm looking for a seconder, that we instruct our staff to issue the building permits accordingly, and because they won't unless we instruct them to.
Deputy Mayor, thank you. We'll call for a seconder, and then I'm definitely going to be asking our CAO to comment on this because he has had some experience in permitting without the NVCA's review. Can I look for a seconder on the motion, please? Mr. Lamers, Councillor Lamers. All right, so the motion is on the floor. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Mr. CAO, would you tell us your experience and what you feel we could do with this to assist these residents?
So, Your Worship, as soon as the Deputy Mayor brought the item up, I started scrolling through my email system really fast and I could not find what I'm looking for. So, and I would turn to Mara, perhaps she could help me. It's my understanding, if I recall, either late last week or early this week, that our staff sent out an email that the DeWitt's application had a tentative permit. So Mara, could you maybe we've already got what we're looking for. Thank you.
Yes,
thank you, and welcome, Ms. Burton. Nice to see you. Go ahead.
You, and through your worship to council. Yes, actually the DeWitts should have their permit in their hand any day now. They do have their clearance. So I do have that email that Steve is referring to. So that one is no longer an issue. Also with NVCA, I believe is applicable legislation. So we may have some challenges in issuing a permit without actually, particularly for a substantial building, without Conservation Authority approval. I'm not sure if the CAO can help with that, but I think that may be a bit of a challenge for us.
All right, thank you, Ms. Burton. Mr. CAO, that's one of the two that are on Mr. Burton's list. What's your comment on the other one?
I'm sorry, I was probably not paying attention when I was looking for the email. What is the second? I'm sorry.
Well, he's speaking of Mr. DeWitt's. It sounds like we'll be able to amend the motion that Mr. Burton has presented. He's now asking about the Gordon property. Is there anything we can do to assist with that project?
So two things to make a comment in. Number one, I'm not aware that there is. I'll have to defer to Mayor on that one as well. And I do want to, the Mayor has alluded to our situation with the Conservation Authority in the past, where I have stepped in and moved the file forward due to the NVCA's unwillingness to process a file. Those have been planning applications, Your Worship, or site plan applications. With respect to building permits, Mayor is 100% right. There is a legislative requirement for the NVCA approval. So Mayor and I cannot affect a building permit by the stroke of a pen or a resolution of council. So with respect to the Gordons, I would have to look for Mayor's expertise as well.
All right, before you go ahead, Mayor, I just want to acknowledge that Councillor Patterson, I see you, and I also see the Deputy Mayor. Let's go to Mayor first, and then we'll go to Tom Patterson. Go ahead, Mayor. Your microphone is muted, Mayor. Sorry. There we go.
Sorry about that. Yes, I'm quite familiar. I think the whole planning department is quite familiar with the Gordon application. It is a situation where we have two buildings that are close to a sort of a watercourse area that drains the hills of Creemore, so to speak, in part. And the Gordons are looking to replace those two buildings with one building that wouldn't be as close as one of the existing buildings is. They haven't been able to satisfy the MVCA in regard to the safety of the building to this watercourse area, and haven't been able to obtain a permit at this point in time for that.
Okay, we'll go to Patterson and then we'll go to Mr. Burton. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Patterson.
Well, I guess so I'm glad to hear that the DeWitt's application it's on its way. I was involved in that earlier on, so I know some of the complexities of it. But that's the thing. It's an operational issue to start with. I question whether or not council should be trying to make an informed vote on something that really needs a little bit more explanation. You need to see the timeline, the chronology, when the application was put forward. Do we agree or disagree with the process that was taking place? I know myself that many of these applications, and I did get involved with the DeWitt's one, and advocated on his behalf in terms of what needed to be done. I understand. I didn't know that we were this far along because as a board member, we don't track the progress of an application, which is my reference to their internal form. One of the discussions we talked about was how does a board member act on behalf of an application? How do they make an inquiry? And we can use this system internally, but we have to know that there's a question or a delay. So the only way we hear that is when we get called. I don't know anything about the Gordon one. I've never been contacted. Wouldn't expect to unless I had some kind of a tip in terms of what was going on. So I don't think it's appropriate for us to be entertaining an emotion like this, especially without an informed report. So I appreciate the fact that the CIO and Director of Planning are online, and we can actually get some details. But I don't think this is
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
Yeah, so I will tell you that I was at a meeting on site. Mary was there and Rosalind was there. Many discussions as there were two very old buildings that were in disarray. They want to, and one of them is close to the to this so-called waterway, and they want to take these two buildings, make them one building, which is going to be smaller in square foot size, smaller in square foot size, and further away from the from this concern. They have hired and paid many thousands of dollars in engineering to a professional, well-known professional engineering firm. While we're on site, discussions with our planning department, and Mary's there, she can probably verify this, that the planning department was quite comfortable with what, I don't want to put words in Mary's mouth, but they were reasonably comfortable with the solution that the engineering department had come up with, or the engineering firm with the Gordons had come up with. They had agreed to downsize to downsize even smaller. And they said, if you can get the NVCA to agree, we were okay with it. And as we all know, that the NVCA has not been very agreeable on this file. And so maybe, Mary, you might want to add to that, but the planning department was basically okay with what they wanted to do, provided the NVCA would lighten up a little bit.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Mara, would you have any comment to add to that? And I'm also looking to other members of council. Do you have any questions? Go ahead, Mara.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, from a planning perspective, we do not have a concern with the location of the building, and they may need a minor variance depending on the situation, but it was something that we felt we could support. Of course, the planning department can't speak to the engineering issues regarding the drainage area. That's where it falls to the MVCA. Again, our challenge is to reiterate the CAO's comments is that in the regulated area, the MVCA permit is a applicable legislation. So we can't issue the building permit whether or not council votes for us to issue it or not. I don't know if there's a means to send a message to the Conservation Authority, but we can't do it directly to the CBO.
Gotcha. Thank you. Doug McKechnie is next, and then I see Tom again. Anybody else? All right, Mr. McKechnie, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just have a question, a couple of questions. How long has this file been going on? Basically, unless I've missed something, I've been here for almost 2 years now, and this is sort of the first I've heard about this, about the Gordon file. So I'm unsure how to proceed. I don't know whether to support the Deputy Mayor's motion or not. I'm sort of thinking about asking for a deferral until we can get a little bit more information, simply because on my behalf, I'm a little bit confused with all of this. So anyway, I guess the first question I have is, how long has this process been going on with the Gordon file anyway?
Go to Mara first, and then I see Barry's in there and Tom. Go ahead, Mara. Ms. Burton.
Thank you, Worship. I'm just doing a quick search here to see, and I believe probably around mid 2019, so probably about a year.
Yep. There you go, Councillor McKechnie, about a year. Okay, go ahead, respond again, Doug, go ahead.
So was this brought to council then before? Have I missed something? Was I away that day? Has this already been brought in front of council at some point?
Not at all, not at all.
Okay.
No, I mean,
All
in
right.
fact,
I thought I-
in fact, you may know, and council may recall, we don't see building permits unless they're our building permits for something to do with that we're doing at the township. So if building, like the comment that's Mr. CAO and the Director of Planning have mentioned is that we can't influence building permit issuance. You know, the only one we can is when we apply for it for a building of our own building. There you go. Sorry. Mr. Patterson's next, and then the Deputy Mayor.
Well, I simply say what we've said in the past. The CAO, I've witnessed a couple of these where there have been discussions and frustrations, and the discussion happened at the staff levels with the various organizations, and yes, got a better understanding of where we were, and oftentimes, you know, we as councillors sometimes hear one side when we talk to the NVCA, and we hear one side when we talk to the customer, and we can try to bridge the two together, but the most appropriate people to do that, and really the only people that can do that is our staff and the NVCA staff. So I don't think we should be undermining that process. We should be trying to work to improve it, but this isn't the way to do it. And so I'd ask the Deputy Mayor to withdraw his motion, since it won't have the effect he's intending to have.
Deputy Mayor, thank you, Councillor Patterson. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, so I want, and thank you, Mayor, for confirming the time frame that I understand this one was. And I'm going to ask Mr. Sage, because he can maybe confirm this for me. Was there not an issue when Mayor Vandercruz was our mayor that we awarded a permit to build a bridge that MVCA would not approve, and we went ahead and approved it anyways? That we have done this in the past, approved something that the MVCA was not approving, and council gave instruction to go ahead and do it. Is that not correct?
Mr. Sage?
So the short answer to your question, Deputy Mayor, is yes, there have been. I can think of my recollection, I could dig into my records, but I know of 3 occurrences where the situation where we just could not wait any longer. One in particular was not a bridge that I'm aware of. They were all planning issues that we challenged the MVCA. I made it public. One that came to mind was the airport lands, and our planning staff were hesitant, as even members of council were, but we waited for about 4.5 years for comments. So we moved ahead without the MVCA. But in that instance, the MVCA were fully aware that we were going to do that. It's not like it was a surprise to them. So there have been occurrences where we've moved ahead without the MVCA. But to Mayor's point, this is a bit different when we're talking building permits, council. We just have, even as the CAO, we cannot instruct chief building official to issue a permit.
So, Mr. Burton, before I go on, so Mr. Burton, Deputy Mayor, I think you've heard a couple of times said that, you know, we cannot influence our chief building official, much like we cannot influence decisions made by our bylaw officers. So, well, I'm getting a little bit lost here as far as where we're going to go with this. I respectfully want to hear from members of council. So, Mr. Lamers is next, but I'll give you the opportunity to speak. Mr. Burton first. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I apologize again for sort of throwing this into the mix tonight. But when the issue of the NBC came up, it sort of reminded me of what was going on.
That's okay.
Yeah, the issue is we may not be able to affect, but the reason why this motion is on the floor, and I plan to keep this motion on the floor, we need to get a strong message across to the NVCA, because they're failing. They're failing the public. They're failing the township. And we had meetings with them. I had meetings with them. They don't seem to get the message, and I think a year, and especially when our own planning staff is saying they don't have a problem with what we're trying to do, with what these people are trying to do. You know, it's time to get a hard, cold message across to the MVCA that this is unacceptable. And, you know, and we're going to push. And, you know, because I tell you, it's getting to the point where, you know, they are going to be under review by the ministry, and instances like this does not look good in their favor.
Okay, so Deputy Mayor, this brings back a whole bunch of memories for me of having the CAO of the NVCA in front of us at our lectern at our council chambers, and progressed into some 45 minutes of back and forth between he and I. And I support you completely on saying that the NVCA does need to be reviewed, as do all Conservation Authority work. And I know that the ministry are doing that. So I'm not sure by doing this we're asking for the right messaging to our staff. He would be putting our staff into a situation where they would have to refuse the direct you know, order from council. And that would be a very complicated, awkward situation. So I appreciate what you're saying, and I'm prepared to vote on it in a few minutes, but I'll ask Councillor Lamers. I saw your card up next. Go ahead, Councillor Lamers.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was just wondering with the MVCA, if they have a problem with this, why won't they write all their problems out at once instead of going back and forth every time they, as Barry said, they hired professional people to put this together, and they approved that. They come up with another reason why to hold them off. They should be putting all their problems in one spot.
Okay. Councillor Lamers, I lost the last bit of what you said, but I think, if I may, I'd ask Councillor Patterson to respond if that's possible. It looks like I'm losing my internet.
You're asking me to respond to what? This is just so off process. It's not helping our cause. We are frustrated, and we're taking our frustration though by doing malpractice. What we should be doing is consolidating what our concerns are in particular. It's not a council issue at this stage unless we're asking for a change in our policy. And we should be taking these things to them directly. Issue the strong message. It would be helpful if your representative on the NVCA was aware of this and could discuss it as well. However, that's not a stumbling point. If you want to go directly to Chris or Doug, the senior management people, go ahead and do it. But don't do it here where it's toothless. All you're doing is just getting some frustration out. And what are we doing? Are we really raising the expectation of the person looking for the permit that we're actually going to get anything done this way? It's not the Wild West. And we've got a process going. And I think as two responsible agencies, we should get together and hack these things out. You want to give tough messages? Give tough messages. Okay. But this is not an informed way of working.
All right. I hear Councillor Patterson, and thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak? Because I would be prepared to start calling. Yes, Mr. Sage, go ahead.
Yes, Your Worship, if I can, just a couple comments maybe would help. Maybe the deputy mayor would consider amending his motion and directing perhaps the mayor and our member of council represented on the board, and perhaps our deputy mayor, to meet with the CAO and of the MVCA. And the reason I do that is I'm going to step back a few years at Clearview Township. I have to be careful how I word this, but for many, many years, we had either a factual claim or perceived situation in our planning department where the need for taxpayers to come back in and get different requests every time they come in created a lot of angst amongst our taxpayers. And as some of you will recall, I was given pretty clear direction, or I decided to make pretty clear direction that had to end. And I want to credit our planning department. I can tell you that I haven't heard about that for about 5 years, so that's great. And that's maybe a discussion that you want to have with the CAO of the MVCA, because that is probably fundamental to the challenges of getting work done and the timeline issue that our taxpayers are having. So that would just be a suggestion. Thank you.
Great. All right, council, you've had a good discussion. Mr. Burton, I'll give you another opportunity to speak, Deputy Mayor,
Okay,
and then I'm going to call it.
Yeah, my last comments are that we did have a meeting with the CAO and the head operations person there, with the Gordons, with their engineer there, coming up with solutions, and they provided solutions. And I sat at that meeting and they said, okay, well, this, and then they, you know, the engineer is very specific. Well, if we do this, if we do that, will that be acceptable? And they said, yeah, we'll look at that. And they did that. And then again, they still wouldn't approve it. So those meetings have happened. Those meetings have happened. And the meetings have happened with our planning department and the engineers from who represent the Gordons. So that's all happened. And they're still hitting a brick wall. You know, so that's why I've put forth this motion. I'd be willing to amend the motion that's, you know, that we send a letter or a strong explanation or some sort of willingness, almost a demand letter that the MVCA give approval to the Gordons to move ahead with what they want to do. It's time the gloves are off. The gloves are off as far as I'm concerned. Dealing with the NVCA has just been so frustrating from so many of our members, and they just don't seem to get the message.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Okay, so for a little bit of clarity for everybody, I'd ask the Deputy Mayor and Councillor Lamers for a friendly amendment to remove the do-its from your motion, because I believe there's already a
That's fine.
good point, so that's good. Mr. Lamers, I'm looking for you just to nod or say yes. Yeah, friendly amendment. Okay. All right, so the motion then, I hope our clerk's department has it properly assembled, asks for a building permit for the Gordon properties to be issued by the township. That's basically what it says. Am I wrong, Mr. Deputy Mayor?
Okay, so I would rephrase that we send a letter to the NVCA insisting that they provide approval for the permit.
Okay. And the seconder in the motion, Mr. Lamers, you comfortable with that? Okay, I'm sorry, my internet is breaking up. Okay, I've got the yes, thank you. I see that Tom Patterson would like to speak. I thought we were already finished speaking, but Tom, make it short, please, go ahead.
I just didn't hear the motion. It was gargled. I could have a clear reading of what the motion is.
The motion was to send a letter to the NVCA strongly requesting that they give approval to the application for the Gordons.
Okay, I'm looking for you, Tom, just to acknowledge that you've received that. You got that? Okay, okay, he's going to request to speak again. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm afraid you put me in as a representative on the board. As much as I'd like to help one of our citizens here, I need to know the details of. I don't know if it'll take me 5 minutes or 5 hours to talk to the Gordons. Obviously, no one talked to me, and I will, and then I can talk to Chris and Doug, and then I would be able to vote on this. But you know, if we're just doing this, what sounds like out of frustration, with hopefully some sound reasonings why this position is right. I mean, I can't sit on the board with a compromised view of what our accountabilities are. And so, and I don't know why the others don't see this as well. I mean, but go ahead. I have to vote the way I think I best represent our citizens on the board.
Thank you very much, Councillor Patterson. Councillor Deneen.
I just wanted to mention to Councillor Patterson that just our silence doesn't mean that we're not seeing it. We are listening to this, and believe me, we know all sides of this, and I think we'll all vote justly for it. In our minds, we will justly vote for what we believe should happen. So it's not, our silence isn't just that we are sitting back and waiting to hear. We do we do hear it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Deneen. I'm prepared to call the motion. You've all heard the motion now as read and amended and discussed. So I'm going to call the motion. All those in favor? I don't have video on everybody. I'll need somebody else to confirm this.
You got 4 in favor.
If you want to call all those opposed, Your Worship.
Okay, all those opposed? That's 4 and 4, so the motion's defeated. Thank you, members of council, and thank you for that. Just before we go on, this internet is not working so well for me. I've had to cut out twice. I want members of council and the public to know if I turn off my video, which I've just done right there, I'm still here. If I turn off my video, actually, the picture seems to work just fine. So I may go on again, off again, depending upon how this internet works here. Okay, thank you, council. I'm going to move on to item number 9.4, which is a request for a proclamation from the Fareed Simcoe Pride Group. I'll read the recommendation in a moment, but I want to advise council that we are in receipt of a letter which is attached to this agenda from their, I guess it's their deputy director or their co-director of the Simcoe Pride event. Their recommendation or their proclamation did not ask for a flying of the flag. If you read it carefully, it did not ask for that. It just asked for this proclamation to be read. So I'm going to read the recommendation and then ask for a mover and seconder. Members of council, recommendation, whereas Fareed Simcoe Pride formed on May 13, 2012, and its mission to create and offer inclusive events, services, and programs that celebrate the diversity of gender and sexual identities, promoting safe communities within Simcoe County. And whereas Simcoe Pride has requested participation in and support from the Township of Clearview through a proclamation, therefore be it resolved that Council of the Township of Clearview hereby proclaim July 27th to August the 9th, 2020 as Fareed Simcoe Pride. A mover and seconder on this motion. And again, my video is frozen at this time. Highly awkward to try to run a council meeting this way. Councillor McKechnie is the one that I see. Madam Clerk, do you see somebody else?
There's Councillor Broderick.
Madam Clerk, I'm going to withdraw.
Your Worship, there's Councillor Broderick.
Councillor Broderick and Councillor McKechnie. Very good. Members of council, you've heard the motion. All those in favor? I'm voting in favor, just in case somebody's wondering. Madam Clerk, I cannot see the screen here now. I've totally gone.
It's unanimous, Your Worship.
Thank you very much. Mr. Deputy Mayor, will you take over for items number 9.5, 9.6, 9.7? And I will reload my internet and return to the council meeting. Mr. Deputy Mayor, I'm going to pass the chair to you. Madam Clerk, I will return in a moment.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would be glad to items. I'm sorry, we're going to start at, what did you say, 9.2?
And 9.5.
9.5. So thank you, Madam Clerk. Okay, therefore, okay, so 9.5 is the notice from the Collingwood General Marine Hospital about to wear a mask. Is there any questions or comments anybody want to make about that? I see no hands. Item 9.6, Simcoe Muskoka District Health Unit instructions to persons responsible for a business or organization permitted to open under the Emergency Management and Civil Protection Act. Is there anybody wish to make any comments or ask any questions about this communication? I think we're all aware this communication was just issued the other day. Item 9.7, Simcoe Muskoka District Health Unit instructions for the medical officer of health regarding mandatory face coverings in indoor public settings. So any comments or questions anybody wants to deal with on that? Then I'll read the recommendation. Be it reserved that the Council of Township of Clearview hereby receive communication from the mayor for information. Can I have a mover and a seconder for that recommendation? Councillor Walker, Councillor Lamers will second that. Any comments or questions? All in favor? Motion carried. The next item is county reports, and I guess that's me, so I will proceed with the county report. As you have all seen attached, we now put out a monthly notice at county, but I will just quickly highlight what that is. Miller Waste Systems has been awarded the new contract for the waste management collection for Simcoe County, which will start on November the 21st, 2021. It will be an automated cart system using some new bins with automated trucks that will just come by and lift up the bins and dump them into the cart. I have had some complaints or comments from various members of the community concerned about the carts and the size. The reality is, companies, waste management companies just are having a difficult time across the country hiring people who will go and collect garbage. It's getting harder and harder to find people who are willing to do that. So that's one of the reasons why Miller Waste was selected. The guest house in Midland is a homeless shelter with 18 beds. County Council approved a grant to them for $35,000 and a repayable interest-free loan in the amount of $22,000. And the Lake Simcoe Airport is going to be expanded. We received funding from the federal government, and the runway is now 6,000 feet by 100 feet and will be expanded to 6,000 feet by 150 feet wide, which is the first step in the future plans to expand the runway to 7,000 feet. It'll begin in this year in 2020 and should be finished by the year 2021. And there will be a meeting tomorrow is our council meeting, and I will let you know at the next meeting what the results of our council meeting is. I think that covers county council highlights. Recommendation be that the Council of Township hereby receive county reports for information. Can I have a mover, please? That's Councillor Broderick, seconder Councillor Deneen, and I'll call all in favor. Motion carried. Your worship, do you want the chair back?
Why, certainly. Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I found a streaming device was still on upstairs, so I had to shut it off. So thank you very much for allowing me to do that, and thank you for chairing this portion of the meeting. It is not quite 6:30, so we will move on. We do have our ward reports, so we'll go around the table, and Councillor Deneen will leave yours till the end, if that's okay. So Councillor Patterson, would you like to start with ward reports, please?
Thank you. I've been working with a couple groups with regards to speeding. As we all know, it's a big topic. I will be bringing a report to the 27th meeting, a report to council with regards to Fairgrounds Road. Traffic calming, speed reduction.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Councillor Walker, you're next.
Thank you, Your Worship. We have the youth committee meeting coming up on Wednesday. And I'm just going to ask Your Worship, I'm assuming that as a result of the announcement of stage 3 today, that you will be coming forth with a press release some point this week after consultation with management staff as to some of the directions for Clearview Township. So I'll look forward to, and I know some of the residents will be looking forward to that announcement as to our next steps that Clearview Township will be going through. Thank you.
And no doubt about it, there will be an emergency operations meeting with the group tomorrow. And so from that, we'll have some idea as to the direction that we're moving. So perhaps later on in the meeting, we'll ask the CAO to update us a little bit on some of that. Thank you, Councillor Walker. Councillor McKechnie, you're next.
Thank you, Your Worship. Actually, it seemed like it was a busy couple of weeks, but nothing really official. Just dealt with a lot of individual complaints, but they're all being handled. Nothing else to report. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Councillor McKechnie. I appreciate that. Councillor Broderick, you're up next, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. On tomorrow, the 14th, I have a accessibility advisory committee meeting at 3:30, and also tomorrow there is a 60th wedding anniversary. And that is it for me.
And thank you very much for representing the township at the 60th wedding anniversary. I did a 50th the other day, and that was really nice, but 60, that's pretty impressive. Good for them. Councillor Lamers, you're next.
Thank you, Your Worship. Week and a half ago, I had a lot of discussions with Terry Vachon and Cherokee Construction, and last Monday, June 6th or 7th, we finally got the pad in New Lowell poured. After a bad fall last fall, we finally got it in this spring. It looks great now. And then coming up on
That's great news.
Coming up on the 23rd, I've got an evening hall meeting. Other than that, it's just a lot of complaints that we're dealing with.
There's no doubt. Well, thank you very much. Let's hope we get some compliments from the ice instead of complaints, but thank you for that. I'm glad to see that we're finally getting that pad put in there. Back to the Deputy Mayor. Deputy Mayor, you're up next, and then Councillor Deneen has her report.
I don't think I have anything additional to report. Thank you, Your Worship.
All right, thank you very much. Councillor Deneen, you're up next, and you have a report. So do you have anything to add in regards to Ward 1 first? And then we'll go to your report.
No, not much going on around either. Just the issues about speeding again every week. Might have to do a notice of motion myself for the next council meeting, but we'll deal with that when the time comes. So the other issue, if I may then, Mayor?
Yes, please do.
Go ahead. Is childcare in Clearview, serving Clearview residents. I wasn't aware of this. I've been brought up to speed a little bit, and I've talked to one of the ladies at county, and I just wanted, because we don't have that issue, I just wanted to make everybody aware of it. On council, the before COVID, there were 143 licensed daycares and childcare centers. And even with the new stage 3, and they said on July 27th, they're going to now allow cohorts of 15 children where there were just 10 before. That still isn't going to be enough. We had a shortage beforehand. That's probably going to be okay. They say it's going to be 90% of the childcare spaces back, but not for Clearview residents and people that possibly are going to have to deal with school. Well, with all the things they're talking about with the schools reopening and the child care, it's going to be a bit of a nightmare unless somebody advocates for these people. And we need to get them back to work just as much as we need to have secure and licensed or just safe childcare for the children. Do I read the recommendation now, or do you?
That I would be happy to read it. I'll assume that you will be the mover, and I will call for a seconder.
Okay.
So I'll do that. It'll be a recommendation, whereas 143 licensed childcare centers have closed in Simcoe County due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And whereas the residents of Township of Clearview have seen a decline in the childcare spaces available locally as a result of these closures. And whereas the closures have impacted the ability of some parents within the Township of Clearview to return to work. Now, therefore, be it resolved that Council of the Township of Clearview hereby support the County of Simcoe's effort to safely expand and retain additional childcare spaces in licensed daycare facilities for frontline workers and workers returning to work. So there you go. Moved by Councillor Denis, and I'll ask for a seconder on the motion. That'd be Mr. Broderick. Mr. Broderick, thank you for that. So if I may, Councillor Denis, just a comment on this. Council, I received several emails of recent. You guys have all mentioned something about getting complaints. This one was a bit of a surprise to me, and I'll tell you why. I had not heard from other members of the public about daycare crisis because of having to go back to work as an essential worker. We certainly heard the Premier's office talk about that. But to be fair, as the mayor, I had not had anyone contact me about this direct concern. And why would they? Because the County of Simcoe had already made some terrific efforts to open daycare centers where they could. The YMCA were trying to redeploy their efforts as well to get daycare centers up and operational during this crisis. And so I was surprised to start hearing about this at the end of June when these daycare centers closed in March. And so it was a surprise to me, but it basically came out of the fact that some essential workers are not having access to daycare, and they are doubly pressured in both their parental responsibilities as well as their responsibilities to be essential workers. So it basically boils up to a crisis. So I appreciate where Councillor Denis has brought this forward. And if I may, I'm going to ask the Deputy Mayor just to comment. I know in our council meeting at County Council tomorrow, there is an item on the agenda where Heather St. Germain, is that her name? I've forgotten her last name. Heather has put together a wonderful report about what the county is doing to improve. I see your Deputy Mayor is busy, so I'll just keep talking for a second. Go ahead. But it's a good report that's on our agenda tomorrow. Further to that, there will be a motion that I understand Mayor Saunderson from the town of Collingwood, who also received similar emails to that Councillor Denis and I have received. He has a motion about this and asking for some support directly from the province through a letter from the warden. So, Mr. Deputy Mayor, do you have any comment about the childcare report that's on our agenda for a county?
I don't have any comments about it other than there has been, it's been a problem at county, of course, trying to get the qualified people to be approved and all the regulations. The big issue is the regulations that they have to follow according to the health unit. So that's sort of been one of the issues and one of the issues has been some of the workers who are reluctant to come back to work in that situation until the pandemic is sort of a little more under control, because we are still seeing numbers show up every day,
Yeah.
So it's a double problem. County is working at trying to make more spaces available for childcare, but it's an ongoing battle. That's all I can say.
Thank you very much. All right, any questions of Councillor Denis? Otherwise, I'm prepared to call the motion. Okay, seeing none, I'll call the motion. All those in favor? And that carries unanimously. Thank you very much, Councillor Denis, for bringing that forward. I look forward to this debate happening at County Council tomorrow. I have a brief report just before we go to our public meeting. And my report is that I'm excited to see that the Premier has issued the directives and the path forward for going to stage 3, which will then reopen businesses across our community. I'm excited to see that. I think that will be very good for our economy. Obviously, it still will be an interesting challenge because so much of our municipality and our region are tourism based. And as we all know, the borders to the south, to America, remain closed. And many of those tourists do come to our community from the Americas. And so Certainly the numbers will not be there as far as the mass numbers of people that come from the States, but certainly we will see a lot of Ontario residents, and that's great coming. So I'm looking forward to that, and I'm very pleased to see that. I also want to assure you at council that our emergency operations team, led by our CAO, Steve Sage, who I'd like to join us right now if he could, that we continue to discuss every aspect about COVID and how it impacts our community. And we're very, very aware as a committee that we're doing our best to bring forward the best efforts forward. Mr. CAO, I'm going to ask you to tell us a little bit about our plans for opening some of our facilities and what we're going to talk about at the emergency operations team meeting tomorrow, and what our path forward would be at this point. Would you be able to comment on the, your first impression from the Premier's directive today on how that may impact us?
Yes, Your Worship, I'll try and be brief because I realize we have a public meeting to get to. As of last week, the emergency control group agreed that we were going to facilitate opening the town hall the first week in August. And the reason for that date was there was some infrastructure that needed to be installed in the facility to meet the new protocols by the province and the health unit. And that infrastructure is to be installed by the 27th of the month. We were going to bring staff back on the A and B teams for the first 2 weeks, work all the bugs out of the facility, and then propose to open the facility to the public after that. And one of the reasons we had to stick to the A and B teams was we were still restricted to 10 staff in a facility like ours. Well, I'm glad I did not send that letter out to everyone explaining how it was going to work, because about 50% of my letter would not have meant anything as a result of today's announcement. So now I think we'll be moving the date up quicker. We can now have groupings of 50 inside, so that will facilitate all staff. So I haven't shared this with all staff or the emergency control group, but we're now looking at the potential for indoor facilities, community halls, town halls, et cetera, being able to open, staying under 50 persons. So there will be a lot of decisions made in the next week or so, and we will certainly, through the mayor, keep you informed as those decisions are made.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sage, and I appreciate that. And, I've said this through this entire crisis, how decisions get made and it get changed 20 minutes later. And that's basically how it happens here. We're doing the best we can to deal with every little caveat that happens to change our path. But looking forward to our path performing better. If I can, to the clerk, Ms. Clerk, I would suggest to you, just as the mayor and to members of council, that we will probably meet in our next council meeting in this format right here, because the staff are making every effort to put the township office into position to house the staff as well as the public and create the barriers and infrastructure, as Mr. Sage mentioned. We haven't actually done a whole lot of work on our council chambers. So I would suggest to you that between now and August, we need to have a good discussion with our emergency operations group, and maybe perhaps the deputy mayor, myself, and yourself, we could then work out how we're going to make the chambers work for both council and the public to attend under this 50-person restriction. So, Ms. Clerk, is that comfortable to you that we'll probably continue to meet in this format until at least August?
Yes, I agree with that. I think we have to make some preparations, and we want to make sure we're being safe, and that we're meeting safely to ensure that we all stay healthy and we're all able to make decisions for this community.
Right on. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Thank you, Mr. CAO. All right, Council, that's our that section, item 11. We're going to go right back to our public meeting. Mr. Deputy Mayor is prepared to take us through a public meeting, which is our process of this Township Council. And so, Mr. Deputy Mayor, I'm going to move you back to item number 6, and I'll pass the chair to the Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. We will now initiate the public meeting portion of tonight's agenda. We thank anyone who provided written comments ahead of tonight's public meeting. If you wish to be notified of the decision of the Corporation of the Township of Clearview on an application being discussed this evening, please contact the planning person in charge of the file. This information will be provided in the presentation. As identified in the notice of public meeting, please be advised that your written comments or request to be notified will form part of the public record. Your communication, any personal information therein, will be made available to the public unless you expressly request its removal. If a person or public body does not make written submission to the township with respect to the proposed application before a decision is made or a bylaw is passed, they are not entitled to appeal the decision of the local appeal tribunal and may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal unless, in the opinion of the board, there are reasonable grounds to do so. The following public meeting will involve a brief presentation by our planning staff, including a brief explanation of the written comments received, an opportunity for the applicant or the agent to present their application and respond to written comments, and an opportunity for questions by council. We will now begin with the public meeting with respect to this file. And our planning staff will now start with a brief presentation concerning the application.
Thank you very much. Your worship, members of council, as well as members of the public who may be viewing this tonight. My name is Nick Ainley. I'm a community planner here at the Township of Clearview. I'm here tonight to facilitate the public meeting component of the zoning bylaw amendment 2020-016ZB, albeit virtual. Let me just see if I can share my screen, please. Can all parties see the presentation?
Yep.
Excellent.
You're good to go,
okay.
Nick. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So tonight's zoning bylaw amendment concerns lands known as 2634 Concession 10 North. So the purpose of the application is to rezone a 2.25 hectare portion of the subject lands from its current recreational commercial lands, or RECC zone, to a rural RU zone. The result of the application will be to rezone the portion of the lands in order to reflect the rural zoning of adjacent property, the effect of which is in order to facilitate a concurrent lot addition application. As indicated before, the subject lands are located at 2634 Concession 10 North. So it's this large hatched area here. Can you see my cursor?
Yes.
Yes, perfect. In terms of policy framework, the subject lands, the overall subject lands, are currently designated as escarpment recreation area, escarpment rural area, rural, as well as Greenland hazardland area within the township's official plan, albeit the portion, the 2.25 hectare portion that's subject to the current rezoning is exclusively designated as escarpment recreation area. Similarly, the subject lands are currently zoned as recreational or commercial recreation lands, or RECC, as well as environmental protection EP zone. Again, with the portion subject to the current rezoning wholly zoned as commercial recreation lands, or RECC. As you can see, so this would be an official plan map designation. So the subject lands subject to the rezoning are outlined in red here and being designated as escarpment recreation area. Similarly, the red area again, subject to the rezoning, is currently zoned as RECC within the township zoning bylaw. This is a bit of an aerial overview that gives you a snapshot of the subject lands. So the entire property, so 2634 Concession 10 is located, is this entire property. It's also known as the Ulster, or it supports the Ulster Brook Golf Course and Community Club. However, the portion of lands that's currently subject to tonight's rezoning is this portion outlined in purple here. And then again, this is just a zoomed in version of that. So the purple area is to be rezoned from RECC to rural to RU. And there's also concurrent lot addition application to sever these lands and merge them with the existing property here. In terms of notice as well as circulation, so notice of the zoning bylaw amendment has been given in accordance with the Planning Act. This was done on June 23rd, 2020. It was done via mailing to all properties within 120 meters of the subject lands, as well as a posting of a sign on the subject site. Details of the application as well as supporting material have been made available to the public online, as well as been circulated to relevant commenting agencies for review. This is just an overview of the circulation map. So you can see the subject lands here with all properties that were mailed notification within 120 meters in the tan color. So public comments received will be read and summarized by myself tonight during tonight's meeting. I can confirm that no formal comments have been received with respect to this zoning bylaw amendment at this point in time. I did receive 2 phone calls from adjacent property owners, but they were generally seeking just basic information regarding the application and had no general comments to note at that time. My contact information is here for anyone who would like to provide additional comments for tonight's meeting. And in terms of the process itself, so tonight is the public meeting. Following tonight's public meeting, staff will consider all comments that are received to date. We will then formulate a recommendation report, which will go back to council for review and consideration. Council will either decide to approve or deny the application. And following that decision, if there is no appeals with the 20-day appeal period, the decision comes into full force and effect. That is pretty much my presentation for the evening. I understand that the applicant as well as their agent are available if you do have any questions, or I can also address any questions that may come up. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Nick. Wait till you close your screen. Thank you. So I understand the applicant is here. Does the applicant wish to speak on this issue? Yes, Mr. Picuzzo, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Council. My name is Andrew Picuzzo. I'm a registered professional planner here tonight on behalf of Bill McWilliam. He's the owner of Wilsonbrook Golf Course, as well as the adjacent property owner. I act on behalf of both gentlemen, the owner of the golf course, as well as Mr. Jim Ballantyne, who's the owner of 795455 Collingwood Clearview Township line. So these gentlemen have got together and they obviously want to do a boundary adjustment. Just like to be clear that there's no new lots being created by this. The golf course infrastructure, I'll call it, does not occupy any part of the property. The property is vacant. That will be a lot additions. The number of uses that are permitted within the Rec C zone now will be, I'll call them, severely restricted based on going from the Rec C zone to the standard or general rural zone. Just wanted to be everyone to be clear on that. Some of the other questions I could see coming are what is the proposed use of the property? Mr. Ballantyne is just looking for additional lands. There is no, they would remain vacant. There is no proposed use currently for those lands. This is just an opportunity for a boundary adjustment. I'm aware that there are no comments or concerns. We have coordinated with the NEC to make sure that they had no comments or questions, and they provided clarity that they had no concerns with the boundary adjustment. Recognizing that also we are going to have to go through the Committee of Adjustment for a future boundary adjustment at a later date as well. So those are all the comments I have. I would also like to add on behalf of my clients that, there was quite a steep application fee associated with this. It's basically a $5,000 review to change RECC zone to the RU zone from a mapping exercise. So I think the intent of my client in the future would be to proceed an inquiry based on potentially some relief of the fee there in the future, but that's obviously not part of the purview of councils tonight. So, if there are any questions, I will stay on obviously to provide feedback if I can. Thanks very much.
Thank you, sir. To Mr. Ainley. So you were saying there's nobody from the public has any questions or anything that you need to read out or anything to that nature?
No formal comments are received at this point in time.
Okay. So is there any member of council that wish to make a comment or ask a question of staff or the applicant? Nothing from council. Okay. This concludes the public meeting with respect to this file. We thank all who provided written comments and for their interest in the matter. All input received with regard to this proposal will be fully considered by staff in their recommendation and by council in their decision with respect to this application. A report regarding this proposal will be prepared for council who will make a decision concerning this matter at a future meeting. This concludes tonight's public meeting. I will pass the chair back to his worship. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And thank you, Nick Ainley. Nice to see you again.
Yes,
Haven't
thank
seen you in a
you.
long time.
Good to see everyone as well.
Congratulations, Nick.
Oh, yes. Congratulations.
Why,
Yes.
thank you.
Yes.
Excited to say we brought home our daughter on Saturday. So nice.
Congratulations. Fatherhood looks good on you, friend.
I appreciate that.
Good for you.
See everyone later. Thank you very much.
Okay, bye-bye. Yeah, that's great, isn't it? You know, that's good stuff. Council, we're going to move on to our item number 12 of our department reports. The first group is Public Works. So I imagine we may see either our director or deputy director join us. I hope so. Item number 12, Public Works, PW 018-2020, the tender approval for replacement of the culvert. And at culvert number 398-43 on the 21-22 side road. Recommendation, be it resolved that Council of the Township of Clearview hereby receive report PW 018-2020 regarding the replacement of culvert 398-43 on the 21-22 side road east of concession 6, Nottawasaga, for information. And item 2, approve the tender submitted by Sealy and Arnell Construction in the amount of $629,032.73, HST included. Okay, a mover and seconder on the motion, please. That'd be Mr. Broderick, and I'm looking for Mr. Lamers. Thank you very much. Mr. Ron, nice to see you join us. And could you comment on this particular culvert job? When do you think it's going to start, and how long do you think it's going to be?
Thank you, Your Worship. The start date, I believe, is in a few weeks, and it's going to take a few months to get the job done. That's a little bit vague, but with the box culverts there.
There you go.
I want to just throw one thing out there for council, for those that have reviewed the report. When you look at the number for the box culvert, the budget for the number seems like it was lower than the actual cost. The tender cost includes HST, and we get a portion of the HST back. It's like 86.461% roughly. So when you actually figure out the math on the HST recovery and the engineering costs, this is actually $8,000 under budget, which is a really accurate budget number that Mr. Pro has provided to council. So good job there.
Thank you. Members of council, any questions for Mr. Ron in regards to this? Okay, Mr. McKechnie, Councillor McKechnie, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship. I've written my notes down. I may be a little bit verbose, so basically just a minor problem, a minor issue with this. And staff are aware, as I've communicated through emails, so hopefully I'm not sort of surprising anyone with this. But in order to do, this is basically for council's, consideration. First of all, council, if you wouldn't mind going to the picture at the diagram on the last page of the report. It's a diagram with the detour route. And just
Mr. Ron, would you be able to pull that up, or the clerk, and perhaps we could look at it on screen? Who's going to do that? Mr. Ron looks like he might have it. Okay, Councillor McKechnie, is that what you're looking for?
Yeah, the detour route there. Just scroll it up there if you wouldn't mind.
There you go.
Mike. Okay, so just bear with me, council. I'm going to just run through my notes here. So in order to do this project, Sealy and Arnell will require access to the property adjacent to the culvert. Now the culvert's going to be going in where that sort of purple pink dot is there. And that's where the culvert is. And on each side of the culvert, on each side of the road is sort of a wooded area. Anyway, so the contractors will require access to the property adjacent to the culvert. The area in question on each side of the culvert, as it now stands, is fairly densely treed with scrub brush and marshy area and such. And there's a couple of old fences in there as well. And these old fences and the trees and the embankment and such, they make it difficult, not impossible, but difficult for trespassers. And when I say trespassers, I'm talking hunters and anglers. I don't think there's anyone in there that goes in there other than for hunting and fishing. But it makes it more or less difficult for them to gain access to the private farm property of the 2 farms that the contractor has to get access to. And these 2 farms are owned by Jim Baker and Eric Miller. And Jim Baker lives on the north side of that purple dot, and Eric Miller lives on the south side. And just as a matter of disclosure, I live on the corner, basically where that pond is that you see. I live there, but this culvert does not really affect me at all. So I'm just taking myself right out of it. I'm speaking on behalf of Jim and Eric. So basically, Jim and Eric are worried that the trees and the old fencing that currently provide a natural barrier to their property will, once removed, allow trespassers onto their property and possibly allow their cattle to escape. They approached me a few months ago and I directed them to staff. They also told me that Burnsides had requested they sign a form allowing the contractor to access their property. Jim and Eric both maintained that they would not give access unless they received something in return, namely a fence, basically a fence to replace the current sort of old fence that's there, and also the natural trees, the natural barrier. So that is currently their position. They will not grant access unless new fencing is installed to replace the natural barrier that currently exists. They both indicated that they would be happy to erect the fence themselves as long as the township paid the cost of the fence. Jim Baker told me he'd be looking at about $3,000 to put the fence in on his property. I'm not a fencer. I have no idea whether that's an accurate price or not. But anyway, that's what he said that he would be looking at, and I take him at his word. Jim's a straight up guy. He's a good guy. Eric hasn't given me a number, but I would assume it would be the same for him. And further, as Mr. Ron mentioned, we're looking at about a 2-month project here. So if you take a look, if you can just scroll out a little bit there, Mike, or so we can have a look at that whole map, the whole detour route. So if you can look at that detour route, Eric Miller, he keeps his cattle part of the time, and I think they're currently up there. He keeps them on the west side of concession 6. So basically, he keeps his cattle on the west side of the 6th concession, and he runs a water truck to them, runs water to them on the back of a large truck. And he's going by my place, like a couple times a day with either water or hay or whatever. For him to take the detour route, if he goes that whole detour route around to get to his cattle, he's looking at a 10.2 kilometer one-way trip. So 20 kilometers return just to get water to his cattle. Now, Eric's not dumb, nor is Jim for that matter. And I'm sure that, they're farmers, they probably made alternate arrangements to get, across into that area. I doubt that they're going to go 10 kilometers just to get to their cattle. However, these alternate arrangements are probably going to cost them money. And so anyway, and also according to Burnsides, there is some question as to whether the NVCA will sign off without Eric and Jim's approval. And we talked about the NVCA earlier today, about how stubborn they can be. And so I saw an email today that said that from Burnsides, and they said that they're not sure whether the NVCA will give permission for the work to be started until Eric and Jim give their approval for access to the property. So as the construction is due to start in a few weeks, it's getting close to crunch time to get that permission. So where am I going with all this? Basically, we're looking at $629,000 project here. So I would request that we add $6,000, which is less than 1% to the cost. And we give Jim Baker $3,000 for his fence. He can put the fence in to replace, the trees that were taken out and the fence and everything. And we do the same for Eric Miller. And to replace the fencing and the trees that currently exist to protect their property. And lastly, I'd like to make it clear to council that Jim and Eric, they're not being obstinate, is that the word? Stubborn or unreasonable here. All they're doing is they're just trying to protect their livelihoods and their properties. And I told them, I said, look, if you guys don't sign the agreement to give access to your property, I said, the township will probably get access one way or the other anyway. But what I'm coming to council with, I'm just thinking for $6,000 added to a $629,000 project, we can make sure that we get access, an access agreement from, get Jim and Eric to sign the agreement or the access form or whatever. Hopefully that'll encourage the NVCA to give their approval and get this project going, and everybody's happy. So I would like to put it out there that we add $6,000 onto that $629,000 for fencing for Jim Baker and Eric Miller.
All right. I tell you what, Councillor McKechnie, very good presentation, and well done consulting with the owners and representing and advocating on their behalf. Very good. Before I ask for a seconder, can I ask Mr. Ron? Mr. Ron, is there provisions in this contract for such things as fencing as part of the work, the scope of work when they're doing this type of work, as well as protection of livestock? Certainly, we are a rural area, and any contractor who works in our community and on our community roads must be aware that we have livestock issues. And so that, I'm sure that's part of this contract somewhere. Help me out here, Mike.
Sure. Thank you, Your Worship. And Councillor McKechnie, through the chair, I'm not familiar with the exact details. I did read your email this afternoon. We, by all means, always ensure that we replace or protect anything that we could possibly damage. And what I did see was that there wasn't much of a fence there. That being said, if we create the need for a fence by removing some trees or other fence, then by all means we will replace it or put it in ahead of time. The $3,000, an arbitrary number. What we would do would we get some quotes to get that done, right? That's how we do things. Get at least two, probably ideally 3 quotes if there's 3 fencers available on short notice to get the work done. It would be page wire post. I don't know the specific area, so I can't say how much fencing would be involved if it's really required. And Dan Pro is on holidays, if you're wondering why Dan's not here to answer the report. So I just wanted to throw that out there. I see Steve has popped up. He's familiar with fencing and bridges, so maybe he could add to the conversation.
All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Ron, and I appreciate that. Perhaps either to you or Steve. And Mr. McKechnie, I will call for a seconder in a minute. I'm just looking for some clarity on your direction. Mr. Sage, Mr. Ron, again, we do projects, road projects many times. We've done them a lot. And this type of provisional type work, is it already built into contracts? That's the question that I'd like to know, whether Mr. McKechnie's ask is actually already covered. So Mr. Ron, Mr. Sage.
I'm going to go ahead, Mike. Go ahead, Mike.
Either one.
Yeah. So, Your Worship, I'm a little, when I read Mr. McKechnie's email too, it was really good. And I was a little bit perplexed, maybe is the word, of why the email was being asked, because, RJ Burnsides do these projects all over rural Ontario. So it almost sounds to me like there's been a communication problem here, because protecting livestock is, like you said, a non-starter. That's just something we would do. And usually the fencing repair is a negotiated. My point is that negotiation should have happened long before we got to council. But I think the solution, and Mike sort of alluded to it and you did too, or I would hope the solution is there's probably a contingency in the contract. And it would sure be nice if the cost of the fencing would be included in the contingency. There'd be absolutely nothing wrong though with council, directing that we ensure that it is. But Councilor McKechnie's right. It's a very small amount that normally in a contract like this, heck, that's covered in extras if necessary. So I'm surprised that Burnsides have had the kind of conversation with these two taxpayers that it sounds like they've had. That's just not normal. So let me know my comments.
Okay. So, all right. So my interpretation of those answers to Mr. McKechnie would be that maybe we just didn't get given direction by Burnside that this is actually part of it, or or maybe there is a miscommunication. I think we need to move ahead with the project. I think we need to get the contractors started. I mean, like you said, it's not a huge project. Mike, it's a significant project for sure, but I think we should be able to handle it, and certainly within the budget of the township, we should be able to cover this. Mike, you want to stop sharing your screen, and then we're good. We'll see what your meetings are doing here. Yeah, thanks, Mike. Turn that off. I see the deputy mayor's request, so why don't we go to the deputy mayor first? Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. My question is to Mike. So are we being held up by the NVCA again? Is this fact that they have to get approval from the two landowners before the NVCA is going to approve us to go ahead on this? Is that a fact?
Mr. Ron?
Yeah, I don't know the details of that. Like this is kind of new to me as of today. I'm going to say that they're just doing their due diligence, making sure that everybody's satisfied. Steve has his hand up.
Go ahead, Steve.
Absolutely. The MVCA are absolutely within their power to ask. So Councilor McKechnie knows the area really well, but for those of you, it is part of the Battle River watershed. So the MVCA, we're going to be encroaching on property outside of the right of way. And therefore the MVCA are well within their means to seek the approval of the landowner. Absolutely makes sense.
All right, so let's stop right here if I can. Mr. McKechnie, you go ahead, and then I'm going to call for your seconder. Go ahead.
Okay, so I just wanted to clarify here that part of the reason why I'm asking for this $3,000 for each property owner so they can just go ahead and put their own fence in after all the work is done is because I have an email here from Burnsides that says that they expect the MVCA will request that we provide permission from the residents as a condition of permit. But they did not ask for it in their latest round of comments. So basically, all I'm doing, I'm just saying, well, hey, if we need to have the residents, if they have to give permission before the NVCA will give permission, then this seems like the easiest process to me. Just give them the $3,000. They can put the fence in afterwards. And as the CAO mentioned, it's not a lot of money in the grand scheme of things. So, that's why I'm throwing it out there, just is almost to expedite the process to make sure this goes ahead as quickly and as smoothly as possible. If we don't do this, I can guarantee you those gentlemen are not going to give access. We're going to have to fight to get access to that property if we don't.
So okay, so Mr. McKechnie, so I think what you're suggesting is that we need to make sure we have this contingency fund available if we need to deal with this problem. I mean, I believe our contracts and Burnside have demonstrated year over year that they have these type of items covered in whenever they do a project. So I would be surprised that we need to add money to the contract to make it work. So I think that maybe this simply be a provisional, which is outside of the contract, to make sure that through the CAO, through the Director of Public Works, that we can cover this. Mr. Ron, go ahead.
But point of order, Mr. Mayor, Your Worship.
Go ahead.
I think we're falling on the grounds of in camera with this discussion. I think we're going to continue this discussion on this issue. I believe it should be in camera.
Yeah, perhaps you're right. That's why I'm hoping to just get the motion to build this bridge, and then we can talk about the provisional stuff outside of this. That's where I was hoping we're going. Mr. Ron?
So anytime that we do anything on any property, we make sure that we make it right. We don't need special permission. As I said, the total budget number is $8,000 under budget. If we have to spend $6,000 to make this work, and it is indeed a requirement for the project, then we will do that. We don't need a special motion, on no offense. But we just, we have to ensure that we're spending the taxpayers' dollars appropriately. And if we go there and there's no sign of cattle and there's no fence there, well, then we're not going to do that. And that's just an honest opinion. We replace what we take down or what we affect. We don't improve people's properties. We make them as good or better. So a fence isn't a big deal. If they need a fence there and we're going to affect that, then we'll put the fence in, and that's not an issue.
Okay, so Mr. McKechnie, hearing the discussion without asking for the seconder, are you comfortable with withdrawing that and accepting the fact that the staff have advised that we have $8,000 additional there that can be, and we can bring this up as an in-camera item later if necessary?
No, I'm not really, because I just don't think you're going to get them to, they will not give permission unless this is settled, I think, now. They're not gonna give permission to the contractor to go on their property, to do the culvert, and then have to fight later on to get what they want. They want it settled before they get before they give their permission. So that's why I just, I'm just thinking this is the easiest way, and that's why I would like to see maybe this motion carry on forward, and otherwise the project could be delayed.
Mr. CAO?
Your worship, we should not be debating contracts in open session.
Thank you.
This should not have come to council from a contract point of view.
Yeah.
But if it is, then we need to go, and I don't mind that it did, but then we should be going in camera.
Fair enough. All right. Mr. McKechnie, go ahead.
Okay, is this really a contract issue? I mean, we're not really dealing with Burnside on this. This is something that's separate that we're dealing with the landowner, isn't it?
Point of order. Sorry, Your Worship.
Mayor.
I've suggested it. The mayor has suggested. The CEO has suggested. I would put forth a motion. We go in camera to discuss this any further.
All right. If we need to go in camera, we can do that. Madam Clerk, I have a motion to go in camera to discuss a property matter and a contract matter. Can you give me a motion for that?
Sure. We can go in camera right now, Your Worship, or perhaps this is something that you want to move to the end of the meeting, and then we could go in camera at that point.
All right. We'll do it at the end of the meeting, Council. Mr. Ron, please stand by. We will carry on with our next item. Mr. McKechnie, I appreciate this, and we will do that. Thank you, everybody. Transfer of easements, property, proposed sidewalk water main improvements. Be it resolved that Council of the Township of Clearview hereby, 1, approve the acquisition of the required easement rights in accordance with the draft transfer easement documents for the concrete sidewalk and water main improvements required to complete the connection between Elm Street and Jonathan Street, subject to any minor revisions to be made by the schedule of easement terms. And item 2, that any necessary minor revisions be made upon approval of township staff in consultation with the township solicitor prior to the registration. This has been a long time coming. Can I look for a mover on this motion? Mr. Walker and Mr. Broderick. Mr. CAO and Mr. Ron, any comments on this long time coming project?
Your Worship, I would like to just say a thanks to the Evergreen Christian Ministries camp, the Ainley family, and County of Simcoe for working with us to get this to almost completion. Obviously, we want the sidewalk put in there before school starts, if school starts, and that tender is actually, I think it's out, and that sidewalk is a provisional item just in case we didn't get all the paperwork done in time. So they came through when we needed them to, so that's helpful.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Ron. Mr. Sage, anything further? No? All right, Council, any questions on this motion? Seeing none, I'll call the motion. All those in favor? And the motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. I'm really glad to see that we're moving ahead with that. It's a piece of sidewalk that we've certainly needed for a long time. All right. Thank you, Mr. Ron. We'll see you a little later on. Mr. Vachon for Parks, Culture, and Recreation. Is he there? Hello, Terry. PCR 012-2020, virtual summer programming and grant application. Recommendation, be it resolved that Council of the Township of Clearview hereby 1, receive PCR 012-2020, the virtual summer programming and grant applications report for information. And item 2, approve returning the part-time youth center assistant to support the delivering of a youth center programs. Wow. Can I have a mover and second? Oh, hello, Courtney. Nice to see you. Mover and second. Mr. Burton, Mr. Walker. And Terry, it's great to see you and great to see Courtney, also another person on our staff I've not seen for some time. How are you? Mr. Vachon, go ahead and tell us about this this great report.
Sure, thank you, Your Worship. Can you hear me good with my
Yes,
my microphone?
you're good.
Excellent, excellent. So yeah, thank you, Your Worship. So I've asked Mrs. Rogers to join us this evening to talk about the two exciting programs that she's put together. So as you know, the youth center has been closed since the COVID pandemic started. And so our team at the youth center have been working diligently and coming up with some programs to engage our youth. And again, I'll ask Mrs. Rogers to explain a little further that programming. Also, you know, we obviously wrote this report a couple of weeks ago to meet our deadlines, and so we didn't know that today would be a new announcements about phase 3. So I think the report that we put together today is quite timely. This doesn't mean that we're opening up the youth center on Friday, but it does mean that we are working on some funding opportunities and some programming to prepare the youth center for when we're actually ready to open. So without further ado, I'll let Mrs. Rogers explain a few more increment details of her report, and then we're both available for some questions.
Thank you very much. Courtney, welcome aboard.
Thank you. Good evening, Your Worship and members of council. So the first point is our new activity kits, which actually launched today. So what they are is I applied for some funding and we received $6,000 from the Government of Canada's Emergency Community Support Fund and Community Foundations Canada. And what that's going to support is a weekly kit that youth can sign up for. It was totally free thanks to the grant. And they're kits that go to the youth's home in a safe manner that can kind of keep them busy for that week. And as of today, we have 30 youth signed up, which is, I've been really happy with it because about 70% of them have never been to the youth center. And they're youth representing Stayner, Nottawa, New Lowell, Creemore, St. Hampton, and Glen Huron. So just in terms of outreach, which our original plan was the summer until COVID hit, I'm really happy to see that we are reaching out into those other communities in Clearview. So that's the activity kit portion. Should I answer questions now towards the activity kits or continue to the second point?
Both are excellent. We can always take questions. So questions about the activity kit from members of council? Anybody have any questions? Looking forward to it. Courtney, this is easy. Go ahead with it. Oh, we've got one from the deputy mayor. Go ahead.
Well done, Courtney.
There you go. Thank you. Your second point, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, and the second one I was reached out to, I work with, and we've had funding at the youth center from United Way in the past. So this, the Government of Canada's Emergency Community Support Fund, there's quite a bit of money that was interjected into quite a few foundations, including United Way and their community foundations. So you can actually apply to the United Way or community foundations for two different projects. So we were successful with the first one, the community foundations for the activity kits, and we have applied, we have not heard yet, to United Way for a second project that has 4 pieces to it. So the first piece would cover helping support get the youth center, the small halls, the arenas, and the tourism building up to the COVID protocols. So that would be barriers, PPE, helping with our cleaning procedures. That would be the first part of it. The second part of it would be, you know, it's a real reality that the youth center won't really be able to go back to what we were doing for a long time. You know, a lot of what the youth center is kids being very close and sitting on the couch and hanging out together. So you know, I've put some thought into what that can kind of look like. So a part of that funding will also go towards, in a sense, kind of retrofitting the youth center and creating a whole new set of programs that are outside of that drop-in aspect, just to kind of help us move forward when we are ready to open but in a safe manner, of course. So that was part of the application for the funding. And then 2 new events, which Amanda Murray would be supporting me in as well. The first one would be Rock the Rink live DJ event. So it happened in both Stainer and Creemore, and same thing, it would be free. And then the 4th one would be a virtual kind of run, walk, wheel event that anyone in Clearview could participate in. It would be free. Kind of the idea, it's like a 5K they would participate in on their own. It would be, there would be no cost associated, and anyone in Clearview, of course, and then there would be kind of some great things that they would receive. So we're just waiting to hear if we get that funding to make those programs happen.
Very good. Thank you. Any questions on Rockin' the Rink or other programs that Courtney's got planned? Members of council? Yes, please, Councillor Patterson.
Just rough guidelines, timelines rather. I know that we're still in the reopening phase and that sort of thing, but this will be new to the public.
Terry or Courtney, go ahead. Courtney?
Go ahead, Terry.
Okay, you guys, look at, I know you're in recreation, okay? This is not table tennis.
So through your worship to Councillor Patterson, you were asking, sorry, about rough on guidelines on reopening. Is that the youth center specifically?
Well, you make reference to in number 1, implementing COVID across the arenas and the 6 small halls. And then it implied to me anyways that you were thinking of using those facilities at some time as part of your initiative here, especially the arenas for the skating. So I'm
gonna refer to Terry on that one.
I apologize, Your Worship. I thought Councillor Patterson was more referring to the number 1, not number 2.
Fair enough.
Yeah, we haven't really determined yet, Councillor Patterson, through you, Your Worship, when we will be opening the facilities. Obviously, with today's news, that will fast track a lot of our thoughts and our planning, but we haven't really decided yet of when we're going to be reopening either the arenas or the youth center or even the small halls. But we anticipate shortly.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Anybody else any other questions of this report? Okay, seeing none, the comment I'd give you is that I'm very pleased to see that our youth are excited about getting these kits, first of all, as well as I'm glad to see that our staff are looking at ways to revigor the youth center programming during this terrible crisis. So as we come out of this crisis, as we get back to reopening all of our centers, they're all going to evolve, from our council chambers we just mentioned a few minutes ago, to our youth center, to our arenas, to even the hallways that we have in our arenas, right, Mr. Vachon? There's a lot of things that are going to be changing. Thank you for looking after our youth. Members of council, we have a motion in front of us. I believe we have a mover and seconder already. So I will ask for the motion. All those in favor? And that motion carries unanimous. Thank you very much. Very good to see you guys. Good luck. Mr. Vachon, now we have your Stainer Community Center renovation project. And this little project is also something that's not really COVID related, but certainly glad to keep moving projects along in our community. Recommendation be it resolved, the Council of the Township of Clearview hereby receive PCR 013-2020, the Stainer Community Center Office Renovation Project report for information. And item 2, approve hiring Bill Lineberg Construction Limited for $20,800 plus HST to complete the Stainer Community Center Office Renovation Project as per their quote provided. Can I have a mover and seconder on the motion, please? Mr. Lamers and Mr. Broderick. Very good. Mr. Vachon, any comments on the work? I understand you're going to be the project manager on this. Yes. So tell me about the project.
Thank you, Your Worship. So yes, very quickly, I really want to take this time to explain to Council our strategy with this project. So as you can see through the request for quotations, we solicited contractors for the labor only component of the project. So for this project, I will be the project manager, so we will not be hiring either engineers or architects to be the project manager. We have hired them to do the actual design of what we want to do, but I will manage that, and I will also be purchasing the materials that's required for this project directly. So we won't be buying it through the contractor. I'll buy it directly. So such items such as the windows and the doors and the flooring and the paint. And so I have some experience with that. So I think that it's going to help with the final budget, as well as it's also going to help us with our timelines that we have. So, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. No, it's great.
Yeah. So I just, so we've estimated the materials to be approximately 52,000, and we're proposing that we hire Mr. Bill Limegart Limited for the labor component.
Very good. I imagine, by the way, Mr. Limegart will probably have tools, etc., that'll be part of this. Is that correct? That's like
you provide some tools.
Yeah, he'll provide his tools for his equipment for his staff, as well as safety equipment for his staff, etc.
Yes, yeah, for the labor components for sure. Yeah,
absolutely. So that's great. All right. Any further questions to Mr. Vachon? Looking forward to this project being underway. Oh, yes, Councillor Walker, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. To Terry, thank you, Terry. I know we've talked about this many times. Does this also include the front lobby flooring?
For you, Your Worship, to Councillor Walker, yeah, no, it does not include the lobby flooring. That will be the next project that I will bring forward to council as part of the 2021 budget. This just includes the existing office area as well as the new proposed office area.
Okay, good. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. And while I've got you, Mr. Vachon, in anticipation of the public library area being open, have we moved ahead with the installation of the Hall of Fame? Is that going to happen soon as part of that?
Through Your Worship, no, not presently. We haven't, we haven't started talking about that yet.
Okay, just thought I'd ask.
Yeah, it's on the radar. I know CAO Sage and myself, we've had some discussions, but nothing's finalized yet, and we anticipate bringing a report to council in the future with respect to the Hall of Fame.
Excellent. Looking forward to it. All right, council, you've heard the motion. Looking forward to this project. Got a mover and seconder. Anything further? All those in favor? And that motion carries. Thank you very much, Mr. Vachon. Always a pleasure.
Thank you.
Legislative Services is up next. Ms. Clerk. Okay. Yeah, this is the Community Assistance Fund. So Mr. Deputy Mayor is here to answer any questions too in regards to that, as well as our Deputy Clerk as well. Yes, there she is right there. Thank you very much for joining us. Okay. Council, if you recall, our Clearview COVID-19 Community Assistance Fund. Recommendation be it resolved that Council of the Township of Clearview hereby receive LS 010-2020, the Clearview COVID-19 Community Assistance Fund report for information. And item 2, that the request for the Clearview COVID-19 Community Assistance Fund be approved as follows. Clearview Chamber of Commerce, $490. My Friend's House, $1,500. Home Horizon Georgian Triangle Residential Services, $1,500. Hospice Georgian Triangle Foundation, $1,500. Creemore Farmers Market, $1,000. A mover and seconder on the motion, please. Deputy Mayor. Mr. Patterson, thank you very much. And Mr. Broderick and Mr. Patterson are right in there. I was going to give an opportunity to Brenda or the Deputy Mayor to speak to this report as and Councillor Leishman, who's not with us tonight, but they're the 3 members of our group that have reviewed this. So either the Deputy Mayor or Ms. Falls.
Barry, did you want to speak on this or?
Mr. Deputy Mayor?
Go ahead, Brenda.
Well, the report.
I've done a lot of talking tonight, so
the report pretty much sums up. Those are the applications that we've received to date. As you noticed, some had asked for more, but the threshold is $1,500. So that's what we've received to date.
Thank you very much, Ms. Deputy Clerk. Mr. Broderick and then Mr. Patterson. Go ahead, Mr. Broderick. Your microphone is muted, sir. There we go.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would just like to, I will not be voting on this, as I am a member of the Chamber of Commerce, and will declare a conflict in that regard.
Thank you very much for bringing that forward. Madam Clerk, please advise or please recognize that Councillor Broderick has declared his conflict in this motion. Mr. Patterson, then, would you like to speak?
Yes, a couple questions and then a suggestion. What's the current balance in the fund as we sit today?
Ms. Falls or Mr. CAO, would you know that answer? The current balance, it's...
How much, if this is the only application, then I suggest that the difference would be what we approved plus donations, plus the contributory dollar for dollar.
35, 45, 40. We're almost, so we've used up almost $5,000. Is that right, Brenda? When I quickly do the math. Just shy of $5,000.
This comes to $5,990.
Sorry, correction.
Okay.
Your math is better than mine, Tom.
So $5,090, that's fine. So what's your question, Mr. Patterson?
What's the balance in the fund?
Well, it was 10,000 if you take that away from it.
Okay, so I can do that math so that you've got to give me the answer. The actual balance should be, as approved, 10,000 that we put in, plus every dollar that we receive matching donations. So 10,000 we put in, we got a $5,000 donation, and we put in 5 because we matched. So the total fund is $20,000. Is my understanding of what we approved, and based on what public donations we've received to date, and what amounts we're now approving to disperse.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Patterson. That's right.
Is that correct? Is this council's understanding?
I believe you're right on the numbers, Mr. Deputy Mayor, and then Mr. McKechnie.
So my understanding is, so was there a $5,000 donation made specifically to this fund? I wasn't.
I believe there was. Yes, there was.
So if there was, then we would have to add another $10,000, which would make it 20,000. So then you do the math.
So if I may continue then. So my suggestion is, it may be useful to have a second call. That's one suggestion. It also might be serve as a reminder to those agencies that didn't get their full allotment based on any spending they have to date, to know that there may be no commitment yet, maybe a possibility to assess a second amount, which I believe also was written into our terms of reference. And since I know of one agency, the Creemore Farmers Market, I am authorized to ask, they feel they still need some additional funds if available. And either I would make that suggestion by amendment to go from $1,000 to $1,500 is what they asked for.
Excuse me, Mr. Patterson, I believe, and we can review all of the discussion that we had at length about creating this fund, to create a benevolent fund to help service organizations that were helping citizens in the township of Clearview. That's what the fund was created to do. And that's what that's what council wanted this fund to do, was to help citizens in the township of Clearview and service organizations that serve citizens in the township of Clearview. And to be quite frank, when we assembled the fund, the discussion was around many of our church community making application, and yet there were none received. And so I found it interesting that the groups that did apply, My Friend's House, the Home Horizon, and the Hospice, are organizations that certainly serve our community, but aren't doing it, in a direct fashion regarding COVID. They're certainly under COVID stress, just like all businesses and organizations are. But this is about a benevolent fund that we created to specifically help people. If you recall, we made a wonderful donation to the food bank here in Clearview and Stayner, and that was made prior to this fund being created. The food bank could apply for this fund. They're certainly serving our community. The organizations in our community that are operating churches, they also could apply if they're doing work that's helping people as a result of COVID. This is a COVID community assistance fund. So honestly, I don't understand why we need to have a discussion about adding more to people that we weren't even targeting, the people or the organizations that I think really genuinely was created for. So we already have a fund called the Community Assistance Fund, which helps organizations all the time. So I'm really surprised that that's where we're going here with this. Boy, we're rehashing an old debate from a long time ago. I'm hoping that we don't have to do that. Mr. Patterson, go ahead.
Well, if I may continue, the reason we're doing it is because we're trying to meet the principles of the fund, and I don't know where you get the definitions of what is legitimate and what isn't. I'm assuming all of these are reasonable agencies that serve our community well. I don't think we put any barriers on an agency that had to serve Clearview exclusively. And I will remind you, and if you want to talk about an old argument, old discussion, it's come up several times that why are we funding the Creemore Farmers Market? Well, because we support them in non-COVID times with the culture and rec programs, the summer students, the tents, the community, the musicians, the event amenities that come in. So it's not something we haven't done in the past. They've spent extra money, which they've outlined, to put on the event. And I'm only speaking to the Creemore one because I don't know the details of the others. So I'm prepared to, when it's appropriate, to ask that the 1,000 be raised to 1,500, and I'll put that to council when it's appropriate. And I would also like to make sure that if there isn't a take, because it's been out there for a while, then maybe we should remind the community that these funds are available. And I hope that all the funds are allocated and not left unused simply because we didn't remind people. And again, I will say that there's provision in our policy that we said to all of them, if it's not sufficient funds and if there are funds available later on, then please do reapply. So there's no debates here. I'm just simply pointing out what I understand to be the criteria of the program and advocating on one of them that I know the details for. They would like to have some more funds if council feels it's appropriate, and so I'm putting that forward tonight.
All right, the deputy mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just opening up. Sorry, just bear with me because so I would ask that council support the motion as it stands. I would suggest the Creemore's Farmer Market, if they're looking for additional funding, they send in another application, because Mr. Patterson is correct. It is open. People can apply more than once for additional funding, and they're welcome, as well as any of the others are welcome to put in for additional funding. But at the time, the decision was made to give what it was because we weren't exactly sure who else and how many other people were going to be applying. So we felt that that wasn't a reasonable amount. So they're quite welcome to submit additional funding requests. But I would ask that we, as it sits now, we just pass the motion that's there and let's move on.
Thank you very much. Councillor McKechnie, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, I was sitting in the car today waiting for my wife while she was doing her shopping, and I wrote a page and a half of what I was going to say, but it's pretty much all been said, so I won't belabor it. I will support the motion as well as it stands. However, I just want to mention it's taken a different direction than I thought it would. I honestly thought that it would be it would be for families, the vulnerable in the community, families that maybe had lost their jobs or had taken lower salaries and such, and are now finding it difficult to put money on the table, or to put food on the table, or to pay their rent. And I thought that we would, through the churches, through the service clubs, be supporting those families, and also the businesses, the Stainer businesses, the Creemore businesses and such. So I thought that that's what we were doing. It seems to have taken a different direction than what I had considered or what I thought it would. And but I'm happy to support it because they're all worthwhile causes. So I just hope that maybe organizations such as the food bank and such maybe come to the township. And I'm happy to see that the churches haven't come to us and say, yeah, we've got these families in dire straits and need financial support. I'm happy with that. But I made it known to a couple of the churches in my ward that this money was available, and but they told me that they didn't think that they would need it. So that's a good thing. But anyway, it's taken a different turn than what I thought it would. But I am going to support it because I think they're all worthwhile causes. But I just hope that the money that we do have left can go to other organizations, possibly, because these three in Collingwood, they're worthwhile causes, but they've got full-time fundraising units as well. So anyway, that's all I got to have to say. I will support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor, again.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. And I'm of the same feeling of you, Councillor McKechnie. This was designed, and I think was to help people in the community, families in the community, and we expected to get applications from some of the churches and some of the organizations like the food bank who are supporting our families in need. But we haven't received those applications, and that's why we were hesitant to start, allowing the amounts that we allowed without getting too carried away, because we suspect that they will still come. And so, as I say, although it was defined that we were not there to help businesses, this money was not designed to go to a business. It was designed to go to the community members, et cetera, organizations that are, and that's why, we struggled over, quite frankly, over the Chamber of Commerce and over the Creamers Farm Market, because they're directly related to helping businesses, although we feel that it's helpful to the community, so that's why we supported it. But if Business A came to us and asked us for it, we would not support it because it wasn't designed to help specific businesses. There's other provincial and federal programs that are out there to do that. This is meant to help families in need, community partners who, look after clothing, feeding, providing drugs, et cetera, to our more unfortunate people in the community who are struggling. So again, I would ask for council to support the motion as it stands. And any organization that wishes to apply or reapply for more money, they're welcome to do so, and we will review it at the time.
Thank you very much. And I see Councillor Deneen, and I also acknowledge our Deputy Clerk acknowledging the Deputy Mayor's comment that we can still take applications. That's correct, Deputy Clerk? Thank you very much.
That's correct.
And by the way, just to be official, everybody, the Deputy Clerk is the contact on this entire project. She's the staff contact for anybody who wishes to make an application. Deputy.
I just wanted to add to that, for Tom's benefit, Councillor Patterson's benefit, that the farmers market, when they applied for it, I did assure them that they could request $1,500, although it would be up to council's decision and the two members of council to review it. And if by chance that they didn't get the full $1,500, that they could reapply for it at a future date, providing there's still money left in there. So they are very aware that they can apply for this again.
Thank you, Deputy Clerk. Councillor Deneen, go ahead.
I just wanted to mention to Deputy Mayor Burton, thank you very much for that. It really, it explained your decision-making really well. And thank you very much for that, for everybody involved. Thanks.
Well done. And I concur with that. Anybody else with any other comments? I'm prepared to call. Yes, Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just quickly then, as a result of this motion, can we then advertise for a second take of the program so that people out there, we kind of remind them that it's available and that get in there, get your requests in because there's still funds available.
Very good. If I can ask the CAO to make a note that we'll talk to our communications staff and see if we can get something out there right away. Does that sound good? Deputy Clerk?
So we do have an online application that is on our website, and it's still on there. We can maybe have Drew do up another little notice on our front page to remind people that they can apply for it if that might be helpful to get some more people interested in it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Councillor Walker. Good point. Nothing further from any other members of council? Seeing none, I'm going to call the motion. All those in favor? Yeah, that motion carries unanimously, and I acknowledge Councillor Broderick's conflict of interest. Thank you. Turning the page. Where are we? Bylaws. We have a tile drain loan bylaw that needs to be put forward. Is that correct? Is that the next one? I guess it is the next one on our agenda, and then we go to the
Yes,
other
Your Worship,
bylaw,
we are
which is
beginning
that's
bylaw.
correct. Yeah, that's correct. Bylaw 20-48, a tile drain loan recommendation. That bylaw number 20-48, being a tile drain loan, be presented to read a first, second, and third time, and finally pass on this 13th day of July 2020. I have a mover and seconder on the motion, please. That'd be the Deputy Mayor, Mr. Broderick. And you've heard the bylaw. All members of council, all those in favor? And that motion carries. Thank you. I'm looking for the other bylaw that the clerk's department has presented. I'm just going to pull it up because it was added. The on-desk item, which is bylaw number 20-51, electronic meeting participation. Recommendation be it resolved that bylaw number 20-51, being a bylaw to amend our procedure bylaw 12-19, to allow the electronic meeting participation be presented and read a first, second, and third time, and finally passed on the 13th of July 2020. So a mover and seconder, and then I'll ask the clerk to do a little explanation. Deneen and Lamers on this. Madam Clerk, Pamela, could you just outline your on-desk report?
Sure, thank you, Your Worship. So this started with the province of Ontario's rollout of Bill 197 this past week and how it implicates the Municipal Act. So prior to this act being rolled out, and it still has to be passed by the legislature, electronic meetings of council for quorum purposes and for our boards and committees could only take place during a state of emergency. There's lots of municipalities in Ontario that haven't declared a state of emergency. And as we're all dealing with COVID-19 and moving forward, the province of Ontario has enacted proposed legislation to allow council, local boards and committees to permanently meet for quorum purposes electronically. We're probably not there yet for meeting electronically permanently, but there are some circumstances in which that could apply to not only council, but our local boards and committees. As an example, we live in an area that has very severe bad weather at times, and oftentimes our local boards and committees, their meetings are canceled for that reason. We don't want volunteers traveling out in treacherous weather. So this bylaw itself would allow those boards and committees to meet from the comfort of their home to continue on with their board business. It would also apply to council meetings for the same purpose, or if there's some sort of emergency, if there's a natural gas leak, for example, in the council chambers, and there's urgent business that needs to be taken care of. So it's only when it's not safe or possible to meet is what staff is proposing. But certainly with these guidelines in place, I think it'll be a good tool for not only council, but our local boards and committees as well. There is a caveat to this bylaw, and that is it's contingent on Bill 197 passing in the legislature. And we expect that that will happen and there will be no changes to this section. But if there is, and council does decide to move forward and pass this bylaw, then we'll have to go back and revisit it at that time.
All right, well, thank you very much. And you're right, it's certainly in our community, we have had weather. And so whether it be a council meeting or a board meeting or a committee meeting of some type, having the opportunity to use the electronic form that we're using right now to continue the business of our organization is important. So I appreciate that, first of all, the province is proposing this, and second, that our clerk caught on that we needed to pass this resolution to get it into our procedural bylaw, and so that we could continue this. Any questions of the clerk on this little housekeeping business? Seeing none. Very good. Thank you, Madam Clerk, for your work preparing that. All those in favor? And that motion carries. Thank you very much. All right, Council, we're on to item number 13, which is our notices of motion. There are 3 notices on here. I'm sure you can't wait for me to have to read them all out loud, and I will do that on the 27th, because each one of these notices are on the 27th. The first one is regard to speed reduction on the 1213 side road. Second one is to do with ATVs on township roads from Councillor Broderick. And the third one is from Councillor McKechnie in regards to speed reductions on concession 6. You've heard from the Councillor Patterson earlier in the meeting that he has a report, I guess, that he wants to bring forward. Is that right, Councillor Patterson, of similar topics? So that will be a full meeting talking about speed and speed reduction on the 27th. So that will be part of our meeting on the 27th. Council, at this time, I'm going to go back to our motion to go in camera. So just as it's a little bit unusual, but I just want to be clear, we are going to, I have a motion to go in camera. And then when we come out of camera, I'll then be going back to our agenda, which is item 14, the confirmatory bylaw of our meeting. So at this time, I have a motion to go in camera, and I just have to pull it back up to my email because Pam sent it to me a moment ago. And here it is. Be it resolved that Council of the Township of Clearview go to in closed session under section 239-2, item K of the Municipal Act. A position, plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiations carried on or to be carried on by, on behalf of the municipality or board, a tender approval replacement of culvert number 398-43, the 2122 side road. Motion to go in camera. I'm looking for a mover and seconder. Burton and Broderick. Mr. Burton and Mr. Broderick. All those in favor? All right, very good. So we're going to go in camera at this time. And so, Ms. Clerk, if you could take us offline, and we will return once we are completed there in camera. Thank you, everyone.
Kayla, if you can stop the live streaming now.
Oh, that's right.